Behind the Line, episode 44. I'm your host, KC. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes. I appreciate all the support. All we've heard about the past couple of weeks is about the debut of Zion Williamson. This was the most anticipated debut of a professional athlete in any league since the debut of LeBron James back in 2003. King James, as he likes to call himself, had an impressive debut, was on the road against the Sacramento Kings that night, and for an 18-year-old kid, he handled the spotlight like a seasoned pro. The media circus was alive and well in New Orleans last night. To put this in perspective, LeBron James and Anthony Davis were playing their first game together last night in Madison Square Garden in New York City. And the entire media was in New Orleans. Usually, there are about 25 press passes given out during Pelicans games. Wednesday night, I believe the number was around 165. The eyes of the NBA world were on 19-year-old Zion Williamson. And for 3 quarters, it was frustratingly boring. I'm a diehard Pelicans fan, and even I found it difficult to watch the first 3 quarters of that game. Zion was extremely hesitant starting that game. He was slow, barely jogging up the court, more like a gingerly walk. His knee seemed to bother him, understandably so. First NBA game, all eyes are on him to perform. Haven't played since the preseason back in October. It was understandable for him to be a little bit nervous. David Griffin can talk all day about Drew Holiday being the leader of this team. He might be a voice in the locker room, along with J.J. Redick, as 2 of the few veterans that are on this roster. But Zion Williamson is the leader of this team. The team will follow the play of their leader. Zion seemed a bit nervous last night. The rest of the Pelicans roster seemed a bit nervous last night. They were discombobulated the entire first half, all the way into the third quarter. New Orleans was rolling entering this game. One of the best records in the NBA over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Inserting Zion into the lineup caused a bit of confusion. It's going to take some time for everyone to get used to playing with him. And it showed. The team as a whole lacked rhythm. But it's hard to get a rhythm going when Alvin Gentry is taking Zion off the court after 4 minutes. He played 8 minutes in the first half. Another 4 minutes in the third quarter. I don't think that was an Alvin Gentry call either. I'm sure the medical staff crunched numbers, ran some analysis report, came up with a minutes recommendation for Zion. I don't like it. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a sports medicine guy. But sports are all about rhythm. You hear players talk all the time. We got into a rhythm early. It carried us the rest of the game. If Zion isn't ready to go 25, 30 minutes, why put him on the floor? Oh, we're going to ease him in. Why? The kid's 19 years old. He's young. I understand that the Pelicans have a lot of money invested in him in the next 7 or 8 years. But if he's ready to play, let him play. Putting him in and taking him out isn't doing anyone any favors. It affects you mentally as a player. When you know you're on a short leash minutes-wise, you're going to start overdoing things because you know your time is short. We saw it with Zion Williamson a couple of times last night. Resulted in 4 early turnovers. I believe he had 5 for the entire game. He showed flashes of his speed and athleticism early, but we really saw what he was capable of in the fourth quarter. He had a 3 to 4 minute stretch where he scored 17 straight points, 4 3-pointers. The Spurs were defensively playing off of him the entire game. didn't want him to use his speed and athleticism to go around him. Zion made the adjustment. I'm sure Alvin Gentry or one of the Pelicans coaches pointed it out to him. Started taking the wide open threes that the Spurs defense was giving him. With the time that he was given, I feel like Zion Williamson lived up to the hype of his debut. But the minutes restriction the Pelicans put him on, I thought was absolutely ridiculous. Let the fucking guy play. Sometimes I feel with all the advances in technology we have today, teams get into situations where it's paralysis by analysis. Instead of just letting Zion go out and play, they overthink the situation. We've crunched all these numbers, and he has a 60% greater chance of being hurt if he plays 21 minutes instead of 18 minutes. It's bullshit. He has a chance of getting hurt every time he steps on the court. You've got a chance of getting in a car accident every time you start the ignition in your car. Does that mean you're going to fucking walk everywhere you go? They pulled Zion, the hottest player on the court, to the bench to close out the fourth quarter. It doesn't make any sense to me. To me, it communicates the wrong message. If David Griffin and Pelicans management is overtly worried about an injury, then Zion could start worrying about the same thing. The risk of injury is higher if it's constantly on your mind because you start playing tense. What would have happened if Zion played an extra 5 or 6 minutes to close out that game last night? Was his knee suddenly going to combust? Was it going to fall off, causing him to be a one-legged NBA superstar? If he's healthy enough to play 18 minutes, he's healthy enough to play 25. If he isn't healthy enough to play extended minutes, then why the fuck's he in the game? This was a critical game for the Pelicans. I know it sounds strange since the message is the NBA regular season doesn't matter. But New Orleans is fighting for that number 8 seed. The Spurs are one of 2 or 3 teams that are ahead of them. It just doesn't make sense to me to sit one of your best players in crunch time. Overall, I was impressed with Zion Williamson in his debut. He's a phenomenal passer, unselfish, at times too unselfish. Always looking to get his teammates the open shot instead of inserting his dominance. That will change. What I wasn't impressed with was the ESPN broadcast team. I said earlier this week, and I tweeted it again last night, that it would be a mistake for Tony Romo to leave CBS for ESPN. Last night was precisely the reason why. In the first quarter alone, the topic of conversation between Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson was about fat-shaming Zion. They talked about why Ja Morant should have been the number 1 pick instead of Zion Williamson, why Luka Doncic is better than Zion. They reminisced about Mark Jackson's first NBA game, like anyone fucking cares about that. Jeff Van Gundy's future in 2 years. The one topic that was not discussed, anything going on in the game that they're supposed to be calling. It was downright embarrassing. This should be used as an example in broadcasting school of how not to call an NBA game. All right, moving on. I'm not a Major League Baseball guy. I've been doing this podcast about 4 months now. Not one time have I mentioned one story concerning Major League Baseball. There's a few reasons for that. One, I don't like baseball. I was a huge baseball fan growing up in the 90s, even into the early 2000s. Big fan of the Chicago Cubs. But as I grew into my 20s, especially once I got out of college, started my career, got married, all that shit, I didn't have time to watch baseball anymore. And as society and my life sped up, baseball continued to remain slow. It's boring. Second reason I don't talk much baseball is because people just don't follow the league on a national scale. Major League Baseball has become a niche sport like soccer or hockey, tennis, WWE. From a mainstream perspective, a national perspective, baseball is irrelevant. It's the only professional sports league that I feel like has failed to adapt to modern times. The perfect example of how Major League Baseball just doesn't get it happened earlier this week when they announced their Hall of Fame class of 2020. I learned a bit about the Baseball Hall of Fame while researching this story because I'll admit, I didn't know much of anything about it. You got to have 75% of the votes from the ballots of 397 writers to make it in. In the history of the Baseball Hall of Fame, there's only been one player voted in unanimously. And it actually happened last year. Mariano Rivera, longtime New York Yankees closer. The most clutch closer to ever play the game. So with his teammate, for many of those legendary Yankee years, Derek Jeter, being on the Hall of Fame ballot for the first time this year, it was only right to assume that he would be the second player ever to be unanimously voted in, right? I mean, if you're a millennial like me and you think of the New York Yankees, the first name that comes to mind is Derek Jeter. The guy's a legend. For 20 years, he was the face of New York City. Not just the Yankees, New York City. Not Patrick Ewing, not Eli Manning, not Carmelo Anthony. It was Derek Jeter. 14-time All-Star, 5-time World Series champion, 5-time Gold Glove, 5-time Silver Slugger. If Derek Jeter isn't a unanimous first ballot Hall of Famer, then I don't know who the fuck is. 396 baseball writers agree with my assessment, but one lone writer didn't. One guy decided to keep Derek Jeter off of his Hall of Fame ballot. Probably some writer in Boston. In the grand scheme of things, is this a big deal? Probably not. But it just speaks to the fact that baseball just doesn't get it. The NFL doesn't release its Hall of Fame vote count, so we don't know if there's ever been unanimous selections, but I'm sure there have. Baseball doing this to Derek Jeter would be the equivalent of Tom Brady being left off of someone's ballot for the Hall of Fame in the NFL. In an era ripe with scandal, steroids, cheating, players in the news constantly with negative press, Derek Jeter was never involved in any of it. I don't understand how one guy out of 397 could leave him off his ballot. Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens were once again left out of the Hall of Fame for the 8th time in a row. How can one of the best pitchers of a generation, and without a doubt, the best hitter of all time, be left out of your Hall of Fame? What kind of Hall of Fame is it when two of the best players are consistently denied entry? But KC, they both use steroids. Who fucking cares? So is 80-90% of the league in their era. Not to mention the fact that both of these guys were Hall of Famers before steroids even came into the picture. Barry Bonds was a first ballot Hall of Famer in Pittsburgh. He would have never opted to use steroids had the 1998 home run chase between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa never happened. He saw those two guys getting all the national attention, decided he was going to even the playing field. I think one of the main reasons Barry Bonds is being left out, besides the steroids, is because of his contentious relationship with the media. Bonds was brutal to the media during his career. He hated the media, and they hated him. Now I feel like they're giving him a big fuck you back for all the years of abuse they were subjected to. Like I've said twice already, baseball just doesn't get it. These guys I'm talking about, they were stars. Something that is sorely lacking in modern day baseball. What happened to all the big personalities in Major League Baseball? The John Kruk's, the Carlos Zambranos, Kirby Puckett, even an announcer like Harry Carey, Jack Buck. You don't have any interesting personalities or stars in baseball anymore. Who's the biggest star? Mike Trout? The guy could walk through Times Square in New York City and no one would recognize him. All right, let's get to the NFL. I've been watching the NFL for 25 years. I've been a Saints fan my entire life. In that time, I've been subjected to a lot of god-awful teams in New Orleans. The 3-13 2005 season after Katrina. The disappointing teams under Mike Ditka in the 90s. In my 25 years following the NFL really closely, I've never once heard a head coach call out the effort of his players. I'm not saying it's never happened, but I can't recall one time until now. Matt LaFleur, head coach of the Green Bay Packers, gave his end-of-season press conference earlier this week at Lambeau and pretty much threw his entire roster under the bus. He was questioning why his team wasn't playing with urgency, why they weren't playing like their hair was on fire, questioned their tenacity, why they weren't playing with the same toughness that they had supposedly played with all season. This is very strange to me. I've heard NBA coaches call out players for lack of effort. I mean, in an 82-game regular season, it's bound to happen at some point. But in the NFL, in the NFC Championship game, with an opportunity to play for the Super Bowl, you think that the reason you lost was because of a lack of effort? Lack of effort is a direct reflection on the head coach. It's a sign the coach has lost the locker room. Players aren't listening to his message anymore. I don't think that's the case in Green Bay. A coach who's lost the locker room doesn't find himself coaching in the NFC Championship game. Just doesn't happen. A coach who's lost the locker room is some guy like Freddie Kitchens, who gets fired after one season. I understand that Matt LaFleur is looking for reasons for why the Packers lost the way that they lost, but the reason's not hard to find. He actually mentioned it later in his press conference. When asked about Aaron Rodgers' comments about the gap between the Packers and the Niners being close, Matt LaFleur refuted that claim, saying, obviously there is a gap. It's not hard to figure out. Green Bay was dominated this season by the Chargers, dominated twice by the Niners. They were pushed around by the Eagles. The Detroit fucking Lions ran for 171 yards on this defense in Week 17. This wasn't a physical team all year. They weren't a finesse team either. Green Bay was a team without an identity. Matt LaFleur wasn't happy that his defense couldn't stop the 49ers on the ground, which was obvious that that's what San Francisco was going to do, which prompted his comments about his team lacking toughness. Well, what did you expect? Your defense had given up over 100 yards on the ground in 10 games in the regular season, over 150 yards 5 times. Did you expect them to suddenly stop one of the best rushing attacks in the league on the road? It wasn't lack of effort, it's lack of talent. The bottom line is, the Packers were benefited by a soft schedule and a lot of things going their way. The gap is wide between Green Bay and teams like San Francisco, New Orleans, even Seattle. The Seahawks hobbled into that divisional round game. Half their roster was on IR. The Packers are in dire need of a number 2 receiver. Aaron Rodgers doesn't have the ability anymore to carry a bad defense. Green Bay needs to borrow from the New Orleans model if they want to contend in the NFC. What did the Saints do as Drew Brees started to show his age? Started drafting nothing but defense. Marshawn Lattimore, Von Bell, went and picked up Demario Davis from the Jets. Went out and got Janoris Jenkins from the Giants. Kiko Alonso from Miami. If the Packers expect to contend next year, they're going to have to shore up the defense. Because Aaron Rodgers cannot carry this team. They were blown out 3 times this season for a reason. All right, it seems recently I've been closing the show with the most ignorant stories of the day or the week. Most times it's involving Antonio Brown. Even though I could close today with the news of the arrest warrant issued for AB's arrest, I'm choosing not to because I'm just so fucking tired of talking about Antonio Brown. Instead, I'm going to go with Donovan McNabb. The beef between Donovan McNabb and Terrell Owens has been quiet for quite a few years now. Back in 2004, these guys couldn't stand each other. Apparently, the hard feelings are still alive. McNabb was on Bleacher Report's Untold Stories recently and said that Terrell Owens' antics while he was with the Eagles, and specifically over the summer of 2004, that was the year he had the media in his driveway while he was doing sit-ups and working out. He was holding out for a contract extension. Donovan McNabb says that is what broke up the Eagles locker room. He basically was saying the downfall of the Eagles was the fault of Terrell Owens. And I could not disagree more. First off, this beef is 15, 16 years old. Why is Donovan McNabb digging through ancient history to bring this back up? He had to know Terrell Owens would respond, which he did, reigniting the entire beef. But it wasn't T.O.'s fault that the Eagles collapsed. Did he have a part in it? Yeah, he did. He was a distraction in the locker room. But the Eagles collapsed because their Super Bowl window closed. During their 5-year run from 2000 to 2004, where they went to 4 straight NFC Championship games, Donovan McNabb was 54-19 as a starter. The Eagles were the dominant team in the NFC. After that 2004 season, he was only 42-39. The stars that got them to that point got older. McNabb started suffering through injuries the latter part of his prime. Jeremiah Trotter aged. Brian Westbrook aged. The Eagles had 4 chances from 2001 to 2004 to get a ring. They failed each time. It wasn't T.O. who choked in the Super Bowl. It was Donovan McNabb. He was the one throwing up in the huddle on the final drive of the game. When the T.O. McNabb beef was going on back then, Donovan McNabb was the sympathetic figure, especially in the media. The media and the public backed him against the perceived locker room cancer and Terrell Owens. His reputation at that point was pristine. He was the golden boy, especially after the whole Rush Limbaugh situation. But as time has passed, Donovan McNabb has become the bitter guy. Obviously, he still isn't over what happened in Philadelphia, or he wouldn't be bringing it up 16 years later. Terrell Owens ended up getting the last laugh, though. He's got that gold Hall of Fame jacket, and McNabb has been denied entry for the 4th straight year. It's got to be eating him alive. 4 straight NFC Championship game appearances, 5 total throughout his career, a Super Bowl appearance, and he still isn't getting the respect that he feels he deserves. All right, that's all for today. Hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes. Leave a comment in the section below with your thoughts. I appreciate your guys' support. Follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84, and I'll be back on Saturday.